that makes me put a potential Georgia indictment a little lower. As we speak, in the same courthouse, I understand, there is another racketeering criminal trial, a high-profile one. And, Hallie, they are 8 months in to jury selection. Not the trial, not witness testimony, jury selection. This highlights one immutable criminal defendants' odds are always better in state court. And that's not a comment on the skill and abilities of prosecutors or police. It's because state courts of federal courthouses. The prosecutors don't have the same resources, and those courthouses are jam-packed with cases. They have clogged dockets, and it's just not as efficient as it is in federal court with federal prosecutors who can bring the entire weight of the U.S. government against a defendant.
You said something interesting about the potential timeline here, Danny, and that is that it could stretch. Again, if this indictment does come down, and if one of these indictments is against former President Trump, we understand that there is an overlay between the legal calendar and the political calendar for Donald Trump, who, of course, is the frontrunner by far in the Republican presidential primary. The Iowa caucus is set for January. You got the campaign trail heating up already with the Iowa State Fair, for example, just this weekend. As you look ahead to 2024, it is possible, right, that former President Trump could see his legal issues collide with the political calendar. Talk us through how that relates and connects in this case.
So this is so interesting. If any of these cases, the Georgia state case, you could argue it doesn't even really matter how long it takes because Trump can't pardon himself. He can't appoint an attorney general to dismiss this case. He, even if he gets reelected, has no power over this case. But at the same time, again, going back to another high-profile racketeering case going on, and of course we don't know if this is a racketeering indictment at all. I'm just saying that it's been suggested this could be a racketeering.
But to be clear, all reporting previously, Danny, it suggested that that is what Fani Willis, the district attorney here in Georgia, it was a case that included what's called RICO. And just to explain that for people, I'll turn it over to you. But that is a 1970s era initially meant to prosecute mobsters, mafia bosses. It's been used in dozens of states now, expanded across the country. And in Georgia, it's fairly broad. It can include any number of criminal enterprises, schemes, if you will. And that seems to be why Fani Willis is looking into that here.
Exactly right. And what's interesting about RICO is it's a relatively young crime and statute. It dates back to the 70s. But there's a federal RICO statute, and then states enact their own RICO statute. And Georgia's is even broader than the federal statute. And basically, there's two main elements. The RICO statute is very complex. Number one, you have an enterprise. That could be an organization of some kind. Here, it could be the Trump campaign. It could even be the presidency. Prosecutors get creative when it comes to what is an enterprise. It doesn't have to be a mafia. It doesn't have to be a company, a brick-and-mortar store, or anything like that. Then you have a pattern of racketeering activity. Really, what the statute requires is that you prove the existence of two what are called predicate crimes. And the Georgia statute lists out the crimes that qualify, but they are broadly defined, so to speak, and there are a number of potential crimes that relate to election fraud or just regular fraud or anything that has been alleged could potentially apply and be those predicate crimes. And here's what's interesting, there are a number of things that are interesting about this, that they could charge those predicate crimes separately and also charge RICO. But the entire idea about RICO is that you basically corrupt an enterprise, an organization, a business, and make it a criminal business. That you do these other activities in service of that criminal business. But look, we make no mistake about it. When it's enacted, it's devastating organized crime, and it is used creatively and liberally today by those state prosecutors and federal prosecutors.
Let me ask you this, Danny, because one of former President Trump's attorneys, Attorney General related indictments, different matters, federal trial, people in Miami, for example, has come out tonight over on another network, and they suggested that there was plans of potential defendants not to give any heads up to his forward before their case here. Can you help us understand what the typical procedure would be? We're talking about former president of the United States now, potentially getting charged here.
in our nation's history. So, yeah, the rules are going to bend a little bit, not necessarily this paper, but it's going to be a little bit different than it is normally.
Danny, thanks. I want to ask you to stand by. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who is posted out of Virginia. We've been talking about the situation in the courthouse behind you. It is highly anticipated. We have known now for months that this attorney was foreshadowed that this into the move to try to illegally overturn the election results in 2020 in Georgia. So here we are, 9:36 Eastern time in the evening. Alone is a not typically seen. Some of the former president's
office who foreshadowed this time period, but Donald Trump, he explicitly, over the course of the last week, has foreshadowed himself being among those indicted, telling crowds at campaign rallies and in interviews that he anticipated a fourth indictment of the year coming down here. And for Donald Trump, I was with him over the course of this weekend in Iowa. He made a stop at the State Fair, but I had the chance to ask him a couple very specific questions. One of them is if he were to be indicted here in Georgia, would he seek a plea deal by any chance? And he said no, never. There is no question that he is taking a plea deal in any of these cases. It was a defiant Donald Trump who maintains, much like his lawyers have, that the election was rigged, and that is the position that he is going to hold on to. Look at the video. He was addressing an Iowa crowd right there, where, once again, he called the 2020 election rigged. He's made it clear how he intends to fight these in the courtroom, including here in Georgia, if he's in fact indicted. The other question that I asked him about Georgia here was the very specific question of whether he stood in defending the actions of his allies here in Georgia. I asked him that question because what we're looking at is potentially 10 plus, more than a dozen even, defendants who are also charged in this case here. We're talking about not only individuals who are working as lawyers of his, but also the likes of Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, but also the Republican Party chairman here in the state of Georgia. Also potentially those fake electors here who had presented an official document to the National Archives of Congress to be counted instead of Joe Biden's slate of electors here in Georgia. And when I asked Donald Trump that, it was interesting his response because he said, quote, many of the allies I don't know, because to be honest, we have so many allies, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, he then went on to say, I can't speak to that. Nobody can answer that question. Donald Trump is one who is known to be often people that are loyal to him. And in this case, there are some questions because 8 of these fake electors, so fake electors, they actually took immunity deals. We don't know the extent of what those immunity deals and what the cooperation of them with investigators may have looked like. But for Donald Trump, he is well aware that the district attorney here was looking at racketeering charges, which amount to essentially a group of individuals working toward one particular crime. And for him, he did, instead of defending the actions of his allies, some who could be charged here, he notably said that he doesn't know all of them. And so for Donald Trump, he is very well aware of the legal peril that he faces and what could amount to a very tricky 2024 if, in fact, he has to appear in courtrooms for any of these potential criminal trials if they were to go in back to trial.
You know, I'm struck by the fact, Ron, as you talk about where the former president is politically, the legal issues he's facing, and the visuals that we have seen tonight. Because remember, and this is now the 4th time that we've done, you and me and this network and our colleagues here, something like this, an indictment for former President Donald Trump. And again, we don't know that that's what this is for sure at this point in Fulton County, Georgia. All we know is that the grand jury investigating him and this election interference scheme has met, has returned 10 indictments. We are waiting for more information. We anticipate we will get that shortly. But we are looking at this. It has played out in, frankly, Vaughn, dramatic fashion on camera, because this is the first time now that we have seen cameras like this in court. I will tell you that I also know that Donald Trump is somebody who knows how to turn on a TV, who watches television. We know this from him, from his friends and confidants who have talked about it. And there's part of me that wonders if he is also looking at the visuals here, looking at the optics of this moment, Vaughn.
Right. Donald Trump is one who is very well aware, as you said, of how this is being played. And I think it's important to know, Hallie, right? There is NBC News, there's the New York Times, there's CNN, there's ABC, but then there's also a different ecosystem of I would call an alternate reality news organizations, so-called news organizations. These are right-wing outlets that have largely popped up over the last really 4 or 6 years since the beginning of his presidency. They have millions of followers, and I'm not just talking about Fox News. I'm talking about other outlets here, and Donald Trump particularly is very much in tune with what is being broadcast on those outlets. And for Donald Trump, he has found very loyal defenders in these, frankly, propaganda outlets that are echoing his claims that he is being unfairly prosecuted. Of course, ultimately, this will come down to a jury. It was grand juries that issued these indictments, and it would be up to juries to decide whether he is guilty or not. But Donald Trump is very much being focused on the Republican electorate and the MAGA movement that he has built. He has successfully, essentially kicked out several prominent Republicans from the party, including Liz Cheney, who played that prominent role in the January 6th Select Committee hearings last year. Those who have spoken out against him and now defended him on his legal peril have found retribution. And not only him, but also those within the Republican Party. And that is why you see the likes of even Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy, other Republican rivals, not really going on the attack against Donald Trump. It's really the likes of Mike Pence, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, who have really taken on Donald Trump in the legal conundrum that he finds himself in, the legal jeopardy he finds himself in. Yet when you look at where those individuals are at the polling, they're about 6% or less in the standings. So for Donald Trump, he's very concerned about his support in the Republican Party, and so far after 3 indictments, he has not faced political consequences. And really a 4th indictment for him, we have seen him really celebrate and almost welcome it from at least the political end.
Vaughn, you're live for us there in Atlanta. Vaughn, I'm going to ask you to stand by for as long as you can. And maybe you're right, that Vaughn, but you're rejoined us now. And Jared, one of the conversations we were having with Danny Cevallos is the way that this particular potential indictment against the former president. And again, to be clear here, we know that indictments have been returned. We know that they've been returned by the grand jury investigating the former president. We cannot yet connect those two dots because we do not know the names of the people who this indictment is charged. All of that said, the signals point to what seems to be potentially another headline, which is another indictment on the former president. How does this one compare to what is in Texas?
Yeah, let's establish this as a thought exercise.
friendly with former President Trump. I'm thinking of Senator Lindsey Graham. I'm thinking of Senator Ted Cruz, who just moments ago was referencing what he sees and what some other conservatives see as the politicization, not just of the federal judiciary now, but of this specific district attorney. They're pointing to the Manhattan prosecutors as well, who have pulled up a case, now a state case against former President Trump. That was the first one that came down some months ago. This appears to be the strategy now, not just from the former president, but from his broader orbit of allies and confidants, to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of Republican primary voters. And I think that speaks to the point that you were just making about the way that the former president sees so much of what happens to him through the lens of his base.
That's exactly right, Hallie. And while Donald Trump has demonized these prosecutors on an individual level, going after Alvin Bragg, going after Fani Willis as individuals, what you've heard from his allies, and what I've heard from conservative attorneys, lawyers who've represented people in cases like this, is the idea of a broader concern about county level, state level, district level attorneys targeting federal officials for prosecution. When Lindsey Graham made the argument tonight that you're basically opening a Pandora's box that you might not be able to close. Donald Trump's lawyers have tried to make this argument. They tried to make it in New York. A judge there rejected their claims, but they're going to try to make it again in Georgia, almost certainly. And here they have a different case. Now, I am not a legal analyst, but I have talked to a lot of lawyers about this, having covered all of these cases. And the theory goes like this. The actions that Donald Trump may be indicted for here would all deal with things that he did while he was president of the United States. And he will argue he was acting in furtherance of his duties as president. Those questions, these lawyers argue, should be adjudicated by federal courts that deal with federal issues, not with a local court. In New York, the argument was different because the conduct that Donald Trump was being accused of all had to do with activity that was started basically before he was president and had nothing to do with his duties as president. It had to do with, cover-up money, right? This case is different, and I don't know which way a judge would look at that question, but that will certainly be posed, probably not just to one judge, but probably through an appellate process here in Georgia as the Trump team tries to A, slow this down, and B, kick it into federal court, where they might get a more favorable judge, perhaps a different jury pool, and almost certainly away from the cameras for the duration of whatever comes next.
Garrett, thank you. Hang tight for just 1 second because I want to go to Ryan Riley, one of our justice correspondents who is joining us now as well. And Ryan, this case, so far as we understand it, we haven't seen the indictment yet, bears some similarities or at least some parallel strokes to the federal indictment that Special Counsel Jack Smith has now brought against former President Trump. One of those indictments, which relates to his push to illegally overturn, as the accusation goes, the 2020 election. This specifically relates to Georgia. How should we be thinking about what we should be looking for when we do see the indictment, or if we were to hear from, for example, the lead prosecutor here at some point?
Yeah, I mean, my big question is whether or not there are going to be co-defendants in this case. But I think in the case of Jack Smith, what they really did is simplify this process. And I think they had the election timeline in mind because when you bring forward a case that only has one defendant, you're not going to have the issues that you had in, say, Florida with the Mar-a-Lago documents case where there are multiple defendants, multiple lawyers. There's also the issue of classified documents in that case that complicates it. And you end up just moving the timeline really far down the road. What you could see in this case is multiple defendants, and that's really just going to make this a little bit more complicated. And I think also the fact that Jack Smith got through the door here first, even though Fani Willis, I think, has been sort of telegraphing this for months now. Then the fact that it's a federal charge also will probably have this case take priority over this case out of Atlanta. So it's definitely a really interesting case, and one I'm really curious to see if they, will be the first people to indict potentially people like, I won't name any names, I guess we'll wait on that, but there are people who might, expect to be allies of Donald Trump who were involved in this scheme, and people who were unindicted co-conspirators in Jack Smith's case. A lot of the names that we have in that case would be Rudy Giuliani, for example, obviously closely involved in this, people like Sidney Powell. So, there's a lot of names that are sort of out there that we could potentially see charges against here. But if you end up adding a lot of co-defendants to a case, it really does complicate it. Then you have a whole new set of lawyers, a whole new set of issues, and just very quickly, this just goes smack dab into the middle of the 2024 campaign, especially when Donald Trump really does have a lot of instances where he's got a pretty full calendar already, just in terms of appearing for all these multiple court cases, the 3 that we know of already.
Let me pick up the thread that you are laying down, Ryan, with Vaughn Hilliard, who knows the political calendar and now the legal calendar.